program today is how to set up and run a successful junior table tennis program. And this is actually an outreach of a mandate by our board that came out of the strategic planning meeting that was held a couple months ago. And one of the three main areas of focus that the board decided on was junior development. So each committee has been asked to try and find as many ways as we can to support junior development. And of course, one of the ways to do that is to encourage coaches to become more involved with youth, to find ways of supporting them. Hopefully today, we get to learn the fact that you can make a living doing it if that's what you choose to do. Our speaker today is Larry Hodges. And Larry, I think almost everybody in here knows. If you don't, I don't know where you've been for the last 30 years in table tennis. Larry has worn about every hat there is in table tennis. He's an author, he's run programs, he's run junior programs, he was a resident training center manager when the program was out in Colorado Springs. The thing that really, the reason why we've asked Larry to do this more than anything else is throughout his history, he has been probably the most outspoken advocate in our association about the importance of junior programs. So, and he's also literally written the guide to doing this, which is what's the official title of it now?
The Professional Table Tennis Coaches Handbook, which incorporates the junior primer and other language.
Which he has just rewritten and redone, and which you're getting a copy of, I believe. And so, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Larry. The other thing I want to point out real quick about Larry, and I hope he doesn't mind me saying this, Larry has won lots of national titles. He's been a good player his whole life. One of the things that a lot of coaches feel holds them back is maybe they weren't, a 2600 level player. Maybe they weren't the national men's champion or a world ranked player. That because of that they can't make a living at it, or they can't have an income at it. They're not famous enough. Okay? Well, Larry has won titles and done all those things, but he's also a prime example of somebody who's been able to make substantial amounts. I don't know what he's made, but he's done okay. But he's a prime example of how somebody who wants to and who gets educated and who understands how to do it can actually make a living as a table tennis coach. And I think it's valuable to know that. Okay? Some of the best coaches in our country, some people making good livings, not necessarily world-ranked players. Doesn't hurt to be a world-ranked player, but it's not necessarily a requirement. So, Larry, thank you very much. Yes, yes.
Okay, I want to thank you all for coming here. It's a privilege to run this seminar. I want to make sure to thank USA Table Tennis, the USA TT Coaching Committee, and especially Doro and Richard Mackey for setting this up, and Sean for helping with the filming and so on. Okay. Just want to talk real briefly about some of the things. Richard, of course, gave you a big background, a big intro, so now I've got to live up to that. But I've been involved very much with the Maryland Table Tennis Center and other centers for many, many years, and a number of other junior programs. And for the last 20 years or so, every time Junior Olympics, Junior Nationals, U.S. Open, U.S. Teams, the Open, every major tournament, plus, of course, board meetings and so on, I get together with the other coaches and we all compare notes. And one of the things you learn is that most junior programs, there are a lot of best practices, ways to really set these things up so they'll be a success. There's also a lot of horror stories of things you don't want to do. Okay, so I want to really go over all these various things we've learned on these things. And there's more than one way of doing things, but there are a lot of best practices and things I strongly recommend you might want to do on these things. So I'm going to try to go over that. Okay. I want to start off by talking just what is a junior program, just briefly, because at the last board meeting I was sort of almost fell out of my chair when one person asked me, what's a junior program? And I thought they wanted the definition. They really didn't know what it is. So just use an example. You all probably have seen Little League Baseball. What is Little League Baseball? A bunch of kids, they usually practice with a coach 2, maybe 3 times a week. They have practices, and then they have games against other teams and so on. Okay, it's a league type thing, but they're practicing 2 or 3 times a week, and then they have their games and so on. The junior program is the same thing. You come in maybe anywhere from 1 to 5 times a week, practice for a couple of hours, play league matches, that type of thing. So it's the same type of thing. A junior program is where you get the kids out there and you train, and maybe half practice, half games, that type of thing. Okay. one thing about tonight is we have done a lot of coaching seminars where we teach technique, how to teach the better forehand or how to teach a better serve. That's not really the focus tonight. Later on, towards the end, I'm going to go over some of the things you want to know about coaching juniors, how it's different. Okay, I'm not going to say how to teach a forehand, but I'll teach about how it's different than coaching an adult. But the focus tonight is not technique. It's how to actually set up such a program, a junior program, and how to run it successfully. Okay, it's sort of the business side of it. Okay, so a lot of times you'll see a top coach goes into a club and he's ready to coach at a really high level, but there's no one to coach, or he has no place to coach, he has no players. So I really want to focus on that. Okay, so it's not so much the technique. Last thing before we get into the PowerPoint, there's also a misconception a lot of times about call it elite training versus grassroots. For example, sometimes someone will look at a program like in Maryland or ICC and say, well, they're just elite programs because they're there just for the elite players. Yet, if you actually look at the moment, the two junior programs in the country that have the most junior players, period, also have the top 3 junior girls and the top 2 junior boys in the whole country. So it's not a coincidence that obviously you need good coaches to develop elite players, but you also need numbers. If you have just one player in one club with a great coach, and you have 100 with good coaches, you're going to get a lot from there. So to me, elite development, grassroots development, it really goes together. If you're a pretty good coach and you're able to get a lot of players together, you're going to start developing some good players. Okay. Okay. So we're going to talk now a little about the importance of junior programs before we really get into it. Okay. And I got my trusty pointer. I was going to bring a laser pointer, but I know I go old school here. I want to talk a few things about why it's so important that we develop these junior programs. Richard mentioned how I've been a big advocate of this for many years because I know that in other countries where it's what it's like, a lot of times I haven't experienced it, but I'm always told it's always the same type of thing. USA Table Tennis, we have 1,255 junior members. That's all we have in the whole country. And that's not very many. At the strategic meeting, they actually was described there. We had this meeting a few months ago. It was called a round-off error. And the thing I kept thinking is 1,255, maybe a round-off error, but that's really misleading. We have a lot less than that because the great majority are under 1,000. We only have 500 or so, 537 who are over 1,000. Serious level, maybe 1,500, about 280. So the reality is there really are not that many out there who are trained. Now there's going to be a lot of these ones under 1,000, and there's an argument that we want lots of players, but the reality is most of these kids come in, play one tournament, they're listed as a junior, next year they're done. The ones that come and stay tend to improve a little bit, and those are the ones that we really need. And even these numbers are misleading. When you look at these numbers, the top 2 or 3 clubs in the country actually represent 1/3, almost 1/2 of those players come from maybe 2 or 3 centers. So right now there really is a major problem in this sport. We need more junior programs. If you look at other sports, they have huge numbers. So, it might have something to do with, let's just compare it to the way tennis is in the United States. Now, if you look at tennis versus table tennis, number of participants, it's actually very similar. We have almost as many people as tennis who actually play. They have 19,000 high school coaches, 10,000 full-time coaches. Do we have any high school coaches? No, not that I know of. And we do have 20 to 30 full-time coaches. I've actually heard estimates it might be as many as 40 full-time coaches. It may seem like a lot, but they have 10,000 full-time coaches in tennis. They're making a living at this sport. And the reason they're doing it is because USA Tennis or U.S. Tennis Association has trained these coaches to be able to do this type of things. If you look at the junior programs, they have thousands of them. We have about 10 successful ones in this whole country. There's different definitions of success, but there aren't that many successful ones in this country. And I keep saying, why do we have so few? Because we're not really training the coaches to develop this thing, which is what they do in tennis, gymnastics, and every other sport. And there's a reason why they have 183,000 members, and we have 1,200. Now, the overseas numbers are, of course, staggering. One of the things that's really amazing is that if you go overseas, country by country, almost every country in Europe, there are more table tennis players than tennis players. I mean, members of the association, not just people, serious players. There are probably as many or more coaches. I can't get the specific numbers country by country, but when you look out, it's similar. It's only here that we don't. Okay? Now if you're looking at the elite development side, because there's really 2 sides of this. There's, do we want the masses or do we want elite? Let's look at it from the Olympic point of view, the elite ones for a moment. We can compete if we get enough juniors trained seriously in the right conditions. Law of diminishing returns is something that helps us because there is a limit. If you train and train, where everyone eventually reaches the stage where they're approaching the highest you can get. And if you start approaching that, you can actually, with one good technique or a little luck or something, you actually can reach them. And eventually, if all your resources go to a few players, and China does the same thing, you can challenge them in some ways. If you have some sort of base, you can actually do that. But the catch is we don't really have that right now. You need some sort of base to start with. You can't have a couple hundred juniors training seriously and compete with 2 million from China. On the other hand, Sweden, which I'm told had about 15,000, which is 15,000 is a fraction of the millions in China training. They have those when they had 15,000, so base from from a few hundred junior programs. They developed Waldner, Appelgren, Pearson, Carlson. The list is endless, and they dominated the world for a while. So from the elite perspective, you need a few. We'll never match China in the foreseeable future, but we can actually compete if we get a certain base to work with. Now, when will this happen? When is the United States going to have enough juniors so we can really compete? It's going to either happen when we focus on developing junior programs, or, well, maybe when flying pigs play ping pong. That's when it'll happen on its own. Okay, next one. Okay, if the goal is to develop Olympic medalists, we know where they come from, junior programs. If the goal is to increase membership, primary thing is juniors. And some of these things are kind of obvious. I just want to go through them before you really go into the presentation. Most top juniors, they come from junior training programs. The key thing here is there's only about 10 in the whole country. Again, only 10 serious programs in the whole dang country. It doesn't make any sense. We need like 100, which I think we could do in 5 years or more if we really train. And let's suppose we tried and got 80. Instead of 10, we have 80. Some people will say you failed. To me, that's 80 versus 10. So now this is your chance to join this. I'm hoping everyone here is actually interested in setting up a junior program. To me, the primary thing, obviously you need to have some table tennis background, but you got to want to coach. You have to like coaching. If you like coaching, you can be a big success. 15-year player, if you have a 15-year player who's actively coaching and becoming a better coach, both by coaching and also going to seminars, watching the top players, working with top coaches, he's going to be more valuable than a national coach, some glorified coach who's just sitting on the sidelines and not doing it. One of the things I used to say is that I'd rather have 10, 14-year players coaching than one glorified national coach who's not coaching. So we need those numbers like that. Yep.
Larry, do you have any more of those handouts? I'm sorry.
Actually, we have this in your packet. Your packets have two things. They have this, and they have the professional table tennis coaches handbook, which I'll be talking about. I'll be talking about in a few minutes. Okay, first thing I want to talk about is, are you qualified to be a coach? What do you need to be? Okay, first thing is just very simple. You got to get your certification. All the things. I got my certification years ago. My favorite shirt is my USTTA certified coach. I don't know if you can see it. US certified coach. It's my proudest shirt. It's also one of the most uncomfortable shirts imaginable. I don't know what this material is. It itches, it scratches, it's too short. I'm like this, but I wear it every chance I can whenever I'm in public because I like it says that. There's a reason for that, by the way. When I play tennis on the side a lot, I'll be talking about tennis sometimes because tennis and sports like tennis and gymnastics are one we can copy. But when I started playing tennis on a sideline and saw what they do versus what we do, I was amazed. But the thing that really amazed me is I walk into a tennis center and the coaches, sometimes they'll be wearing a shirt that says USTA certified coach. And I was very impressed. I thought that was really impressive. So there are a lot of examples of professional coaches who don't have high ratings or lead titles. Some of them I mentioned, Bill Louie, Dana Jeffries, Carl Harden, Missy Sandberg, who coached Appelgren. There's a guy who I was hoping Danny would be here because I've been trying for weeks to remember Danny Seymour's assistant coach, who was his assistant coach for many years. I can't remember his name. Does anyone know his name?
Mark Norby.
Not Mark Norby.
Barry Rogers.
1100 player. He was kind of old. He'd be like 80 by now. In Pittsburgh. I can't remember his name. He was a really good coach at all these camps back in the late 70s, early 80s. I can't remember his name. He was a very good one. To a big air, an 1800 player looks like a world champion. But the idea about having to be a high-level player, it is true that if you really want to be a really, really high-level coach, you need to work with high-level players at some point. When people say you have to be a top player to be able to do that, there's a certain grain of truth because if you're a 1500 player and you spend all your time watching the top players, you'll become a pretty good coach that way, but you don't see how they develop it. So to become a really top coach, it is important to find chances to watch how the top players train, watch the top juniors, work with the top coaches. This past summer, I heard Stone Binkson was running a camp. You all know who Stone Binkson is, I hope, 1970 world champion, more importantly, one of the most renowned coaches in the world. And I saw he was running a camp, and I ran to my calendar, and I was looking at this thing, and I finally found 2 weeks free. And I ran out there for 2 weeks in California, not as a coach, but for the first time in 20 years or so as a player, and worked with them. I spent half the sessions as coach, half them as a player. We worked out a deal, so half player, half coach. And I got to work with Stone Binkson. Man, I learned a lot of stuff there, because I've spent so many years with a lot of Chinese coaches. Getting Stellan's perspective was incredible. There are a lot of stuff in my coach's handbook I immediately started updating based on that. So you can really learn to do these things at any level. Okay. I periodically want to stop and ask if there's questions. Are there any questions right now? The key is to work at your coaching until you are a top coach. It doesn't matter where your ranking or level is. Okay? There are many ways to develop those coaching skills. USDTA coaching clinics, working with top coaches, and studying the top players as much as you can. Before you go to the next one, any questions on this?
Dora, what's the top European coach that wasn't a table tennis coach at all? Well, a player.
Is he single?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it?
One of the most famous coaches in the world came from another sport and never played table tennis. And he's one of the most renowned.
Best ever paid.
Yeah, the highest level paid
Well,
guy.
since we're on the,
The Japanese coach, right?
okay, I'm gonna, yes.
Yeah, well, I'd like to know more about that. What was it about him that made him such a good coach without the table tennis experience?
He was,
What was it
well,
about?
Dora knows him more than I do. I mean, I know who he is, but I don't know him personally.
He played, but just a little bit. He was a team handball.
Yeah, he came from another
Team
sport, and he was a great
Yeah.
coach in another sport.
But his brother played. He liked. He basically he was self-instructed, and he learned a lot.
Hey, you probably
read a
watched,
lot, and he loved the sport. And it's not only a message. We had many players, many coaches in Romania who discovered big players like Badescu, Tilia, and Nastase. They were never a player. I never knew them as a player, but they were so into table tennis. They loved table. They wanted to learn. They were very passionate, and they just.
if you, Samson
It's a
Dubino.
lot of an inner drive.
Samson
It really
Dubino,
is.
who was on the U.S. national team.
A lot of it is.
His coach, Carl Harden, was his primary coach almost all his entire career, and he's about, I think, like 1,100. Now has a book on table tennis, I think. So he's very good at that. So, yeah.
But now Carl, and I'll say, Carl went around and attended every seminar, took every class he could.
Yeah.
Carl was one of those guys that studied an enormous amount
Yeah,
and
but that-
had a very good mind.
Yeah, the key thing
Turned
is
out to
that
be a very good coach.
one of the key things, for example, a lot of times you watch the players and you see what they're doing, but the key thing is to watch them in training, watch what the coaches do to see how they get there. You may see a player doing something, but if you watch the drills they do, then you can say, oh, this is how they develop that, which is a very important aspect of becoming a good coach. Okay. One of the things about coaching also is, again, we're using tennis as an example. There are many tennis coaches that can't even beat their high school players. And this right here about my best tennis coach. When I was playing tennis, I still play tennis twice a week. There's a coach there who helped me tremendously. I had great difficulties with my second serve, my backhand, voice, and there are a lot of coaches I worked with there because I go there in these training programs. And he helped me tremendously, more than any other coach. He was the best tennis coach I've had. And I've had several of the coaches were champions, regional champions and stuff. Ones, the coaches join in, I'd play them, and they'd actually kill me. Then one day, as coaches do, the coaches join in, and this coach joined in the games, and it was King of the Hill. And so I beat him a point, so I stayed King of the Hill. I was thinking, wow, that was great. He came up again, I beat him again, and after, I was very proud of myself. I gradually dawned on me, I'm better than him. He's this guy who's been teaching me, and I'm a lot better, not just better, a lot better than this guy. I could beat him easily. So, but this guy has been coaching full time for 20 years. He's about my age, so it wasn't age or anything. But he was such a good coach. But he was level in table tennis terms is probably 200-300 points weaker than mine in tennis. But boy, the guy knew how to coach. And I found out later he coached a bunch of championship high school teams. So yes, you can do that. As far as level of play, if you're going to be doing a lot of private one-on-one coaching, then you do need to have some level of play. I think coaches like Bill Lou, for example, in California, they do group sessions. So if you focus on group training or a lot of multi-ball training, there's a picture of multi-ball training, then you don't need to be a high-level coach. The thing I'm trying to stress is there's a myth in table tennis that you've got to be at either a U.S. national team member level or 24-hour level, or at least like a 22 or something like that, when you don't really need to be that at that level. An 18-hour player is perfectly good enough. 15-hour players can do it. So yes, if you really are interested, you can make a living at it. And I'm going to be talking about that more. That fact that you can actually make good money at it, as well as being a good coach. And you should put your face here. You could be the one feeding multi-ball to these kids. Yeah. One last thing before you leap into it, why you should, because as you can tell, I really want to sell the idea that I want every one of you to become full-time professional coaches running junior programs. If you do these things, you will make good money while doing something you love. If you don't like money and you don't like coaching, there's no point really in being here. Or, of course, you could stay here if you might be a club administrator who wants to set up for others. That's okay as well. But as far as being a coach, you have to like coaching. You can't go out there and spend your career coaching 20, 25 hours unless you like coaching. But if you like it, it's going to be a very good, lucrative thing. You'll make good money. You get 20 juniors trained twice a week, $15 a session, 50 weeks. That's $30,000 a year. And notice I said twice a week. That's 2 hours a session. That's 4 hours a week. 4 hours and you make $15,000. Now there's a bunch of other things. Minus expenses, you might have a second coach, hitting partner, all this. And yeah, it's easier said than done. But at my club, I already know that when I run junior programs or in Shanjack, we're always making a minimum of $100 an hour, and we're usually making $150 an hour in that range. I shouldn't mention names because there might be an accountant hiding here, but yes, I know at least 2 coaches I work with who are making this much, but I was wrong. I've actually, since I did this, I verified it's actually well above this. More than one of them is making over $250,000 a year, just from coaching alone. He's at this tournament too, by the way. I know 2 coaches at this tournament are making over $200,000 a year. The catch is they're doing a lot of hours. I don't think most people want to coach 60 hours a week. But the thing is, you can do 25 and make $70,000 a year. I know that my last year of coaching, before I got injured and I finally stopped for a while, I think I made $60,000 and I was doing about 22, 23 hours a week. Both group sessions and private coaching. And that was about 8, 9 years ago when I stopped, doing it really full time. So that's like $70,000, $80,000 in dollars. So you can make some good money at these things. Group sessions both for juniors and other ones. And you should be making $60,000 a year at 25 hours a week. Are you all sold now? You all ready to go out there and make good money and become coaches? Because I want to make sure you're all ready for that, Richard.
Just also to say, although I'm not doing it full time currently, physically I can't do it, but I did it for a long time, and that's all quite true. You can easily average $100 an hour in group lessons, but let me also say that teaching groups is a skill in its own. It's a different format. Working with 6 or 7 tables at a time is a different skill than working one-on-one, And I personally have always enjoyed the group session more than the one-on-one lessons, although you have to do both as a coach, because you get a team atmosphere and you can create an energy in a group that just doesn't exist on a one-on-one basis a lot of times. And I don't want to talk too much, but I just want to say that that's very doable. I know lots of coaches that do that.
One of the things that there are differences. Like at our club, we do a lot of private coaching, and that helps fill up the group sessions. The private coaching, they might do $50 an hour, and then you think that they're making 15 hours of private coaching and 150 in the group session. Well, let's drop the private coaching. But of course, you drop that, you lose some of the junior programs and the other things, because there's also other
you almost have to do
classes
both.
and so on. It does bring them up. So it's easier to fill them up if we're willing to do both. One of the nice things, though, is once you fill them up to a certain number, as I'll talk about what I call critical mass, then you can do less and less private coaching because you can keep the junior program filled up. Okay. So there's any questions about this? Any questions before we move on? Okay. Next one. Okay. Professional Table Tennis Coaches Handbook, which every one of you has in your packet. It's going to be online starting in January. A lot of it is incorporated from the various primers I put up, the junior primer, beginning class primer, and professional coaches primer. This is about the job of being a professional table tennis coach. A lot of the stuff I'll be covering here tonight is in the chapters on junior programs and setting them up, as well as attracting students, which is to me the biggest thing I'm covering tonight. Okay, so I do want to urge you to make sure to go through this thing. This is an ongoing project. If you look on the bottom of it, it actually has a date. We're going to be updating this on a regular basis. Hopefully we'll reach a stage where we'll do an annual update, and people know to get their new one once per year. But we'll keep incorporating more things to it. I added a bunch of pages to it just like a month or so ago, and then hopefully right now it's pretty good for now. But there's a lot more that go on to it. Okay, so a lot of stuff I covered tonight will be in there. But there's also the focus of that is to being a professional table tennis coach. Means not just junior programs, but making a living at it. Okay. Now it doesn't mean you have to be a professional table tennis coach to run a junior program. You can run a junior program a few times a week as probably as an advanced hobby or something like that. So you can do it both ways. But I do think that we do think we need to have focus on both professional coaches and those who run the junior programs, or both. Okay, next page. Now, first thing about trying to sign up a junior program is always that big headache. Where you get your facility, tables, other equipment. Now, the main ways of doing this. Just how many people here have right now, if they wanted to run a junior program, have a facility available right now? Raise your hand. How many people, where you could run 3 times a week and you could have at least 10 tables? Okay. How many people here would find getting a facility equipment is one of the things you have to look into? It is. Okay, for a lot of programs, that's one of the big stumbling blocks. Where do you get these things? About half the people in the room, I'll raise their hand on that one. I think a lot of people who are first considering this, if you're some 2,400 player or some you're an 1,800 player, and you're thinking of doing this, your first thought is, where am I going to do this thing? Now, you could work with existing clubs. There are hundreds right now that don't have coaches. You can approach one of the existing clubs and ask if you can set up a junior program. Say, I need these number of tables, and so on. Like, for example, I've been coaching at the Maryland Table Tennis Center a lot, but the Potomac Table Tennis Club nearby, they want coaching, and so they managed to get the management to give them a full extra day. And so then first me, later Chen, when I was stopped coaching, went in there and they started coaching over there. So you could, gain a facility, go to existing clubs and see if you can get it. The first thing is, if they realize you can fill it up, then they are not probably allowed. So you can work with the existing ones. You can do ones at local schools, rec centers, churches, anywhere. So the idea is you could go to one of those places. Getting in facilities, if you really, once you start doing it, you'll discover it's not as difficult as you find. Finding a full-time one costs rent. If you're going to run just a junior program, 2 or 3 times a week, you can actually do that at rec centers and schools sometimes. Okay, so getting a facility for that part is not as hard. The other act, though, is if you want to start a professional club. If you want to run a full-time table tennis center and run a full-time training program, they're popping up all over the country. There's about 20 in the country now. There are 4 within about 30-minute drive of me in Maryland now. And I know there are 6 in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I'm told there's about a bunch of them opening up around LA, several in New York. 10 years ago, there was only 2 in the entire country. And when we opened the Maryland Table Tennis Center, we really were the only one. Well, Westfield is a full-time club, but it was pretty much not really professionalized. There's a league one, not so much a training center. Okay, so there are a lot of you might want to consider opening a professional club. So these are some of your main options doing that. Another one is emerging one is college coaches. You could use a college facility both for the college students and as a regular club where you can also do the junior training and other activities. I actually did that in the 80s for a while. I ran a club. We had 16 tables in 2 adjoining rooms, and after about a year, the college club became a problem because we couldn't actually do anything else because the college students took it over. It got so popular. 7 days a week, they used all 16 tables, and they eventually made a rule, only college students. And so that sort of ended as a regular club, except, wait a minute, the place is full of college students. But they did have there are a lot of college students you could coach and a lot of junior, and you could have set up a junior program there if we set that and established it first. Okay, so these are your options basically: existing clubs, professional clubs, that type of thing. Because facility is one of the very, very common problems and common questions. Are there any questions on this? Questions or suggestions if you have ideas on ways to help getting a facility?
There are also some examples around the country of successful programs in health clubs and racket clubs, piggybacking on the tennis centers. And in Atlanta for many years, I was in a rackets club that had 6 tennis pros, 2 squash pros, racquetball pro, and 2 table tennis pros, and we had this big thing with rackets. But what's his name in California? Attila has a program in a tennis club, and I think there's some others too. So you might look at some of the existing tennis facilities in the country, because you can bring in more capital on a tennis court with table tennis than you can by tennis.
My tennis my tennis center, and actually I've been discussing it. I haven't done it seriously, but we're considering setting up a table tennis program there maybe once a week because they have all these tennis courts, and we had to bring the tables over. It's a big hassle, but there's actually a Gold's Gym. There's some coaches have worked with them because that's actually a very big open opportunity because almost all Gold's Gyms and places like that, almost every one of those facilities has an aerobics area. And the aerobics area is usually this big room, which have room for about 6 tables. And the aerobics room is basically used during the day. It's mostly women come in during the day or retired people. But the amazing thing is, these rooms are used mostly during the day. Around 5, 6 p.m., by 7 p.m., they're vacant. And that's actually a big opportunity. I was looking into that once at one point. I never got back to it. But I actually talked to some Gold Gym people, and they say, yeah, that's an opportunity because they really have this room that's open at night. So that actually is another way you can look into that. Yep.
Yeah, I just wanted, I know in San Jose, there's a private school, which is in Northern California. There's a private school that I know was hurting for money, and a club opened up in San Jose where they were allowed to use the school facility 4 times a week. So that could be another opportunity, because I know right now, because the economy, private schools are not doing as well. So I know a club opened up that's open 4 days a week.
Yeah.
That is charging pretty cheap rent compared to what they normally would
Yeah,
charge.
for a junior program, schools are a really good opportunity. I mean, so like I said, there's 2 routes of going. You can go to the clubs, schools, rec centers, things like that, Gold's Gym, and run a program that meets 2 or 3, maybe 2 or 3 times a week as a junior program, or of course the professional club where it's open 7 days a week and it's a full-time table tennis center, which of course I kind of like that idea because I've been working at one since 1991.
Larry?
Yep.
Yeah, it was in '91 we approached our Harlingen Parks and Recreation, and the director took a liking, and he offered the facility to use. They had these cheap tables, the green ones with frames. We had to put magazines under the legs to keep them balanced.
Yep.
But we eventually got up to about 12 tables. And what I've done is at the one school that I work with 3rd and 4th and 5th and 6th grade students, 2 PE classes at St. Paul Academy. And what we've done to help them along is the old tables, the tables we have when we replace them, we offer them at half price to the school, and they have about 6 tables there. Not only has that helped us, but they, in reference to getting more younger players, but we also have the ability to ask them, can we use your facility? Because Parks and Recreation closed the building for a whole week. And they say, yeah, come on over. So it's worked out good. And we have, when they collapse all the walls, there's about 8,000 square feet to play, especially to set up tournaments. And we just ordered 12 of these butterfly centerfolds.
Yep.
We just ordered 12 of them.
Yep.
And I'm also into one of the public school systems there, working in 2 different schools with the 5th and 6th, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders in 2 middle schools. And that's given me access to them, and then I put tournaments out for the kids. And what I'm trying to do is get the table tennis into the high school as well. But I'm trying to work from the lower grades up. And it's been very successful, and
There's
you got to talk to the superintendent or what have you. Smaller school districts, you can do that.
There are a number of ways. There's a lot of different ways of getting these things done. Looking at other equipment like tables, net bars, and so on. If you're going to a, you have a question?
Oh, well, yeah, Larry, this may be a little, it's kind of on topic, but also a very practical problem that I have found, especially when you're dealing with schools and some, rec centers and so forth, and that is storage.
Storage.
Yes.
The
biggest
Always,
problem-
always comes up.
If
Yes.
so, and I find that there is a lack of those space-saving type of
Yeah.
tables that nest together.
Yeah.
And Stiga used to make them, they don't anymore.
Butterfly has it.
What they do is they're-
Butterfly has them?
yeah,
I know
they're-
Killerspin does, but we,
Yeah. When you do these programs, it's very important to understand the storage problem. But
Right.
there's really 2 types of tables as far as we're interested in. There's a lot of really nice ones that fold together and everything. They roll around. They're great. But when you try to store them, they're about that wide.
Yeah.
Really thick. Other ones are a little more cumbersome to use, but they come together so flat, they don't take up nearly as much space. If you're going to be in a program that has to constantly put them in storage and take them out, like in a school or rec center, you probably want to get the ones like that. Okay? I mean, because it's going to take up a lot less storage. The storage
About
is
half.
a big thing for this type
About
of thing. Obviously, that's one of the advantages of a professional club. I know clubs that have a table set up, and they don't take it down for 10, 15 years. The table just sits there, until it wears down completely. Yep.
About the storage, I know like some schools, like I teach after school programs, and at some schools they have the cafeteria tables that come out like along all the walls, and I know
Yeah.
for those schools they basically told me we can't keep your tables anywhere. But I know there were some multi-use rooms where you can leave where they have walls, you can just leave them against the walls, because I know some principals said, where are we going to store the tables? But then when I looked at the multi-use room, I said, can we just store it against the wall over there? And they said it was fine. And another principal mentioned the idea of keeping a shed, like some.
I actually have seen sheds
Yeah,
built
so-
by the local clubs
Yeah.
at the
So that's
school
another thing
outside,
you could consider.
and they just
You could-
roll them in and out of the shed.
That's right. I remember a club that did that. I
you
hadn't
could
thought about
request-
that.
You could request the principal if they would be willing to keep a shed.
Yeah, one of the rooms that we're using at this middle school, they just assigned a room to us where we could set up 2 tables and they could just stay there.
That shed thing, I remember, I just saw that, because many years ago, I was up in Pennsylvania, and I went to a club, and they brought the tables outside, and I said, oh, you have a shed for your table? I said, yeah, we went over to the, I think, Home Depot, and wherever, and, just ordered the shed, put out there, and that's where they keep their tables for their school thing. And the club meets, about 3 times a week, and they bring their tables in and out. So, if it's just a shed, it's probably not that expensive. So, but basically, there's 2 options. One, if you're doing something in schools and things like that, then, I think Richard mentioned this, you can basically put a request for tables. People who donate tables. Personally, I like to have matching tables, but if it's going to be something like that, you might have to do that. Ideally, and especially if you're doing a full-time center, then you're going to want to get nice ones. More, not necessarily brand new, but after a major tournament, like at this one, for example, you can buy tables very inexpensively. There's also a lot of distributors that will give you big discounts. Like, for example, at my club, there's a sponsor that basically says, okay, we give you the tables very cheaply. They give us the barriers free. They give us huge numbers of balls per year. In return, we only sell their brand of equipment. And also, we all wear that brand. So you can get sponsors of that sort of thing. I mean, you still have to pay something, but they will do that. One of the things I've always thought was very important is if we get a good credit rating, then you can just, I think a lot of these distributors, I've spoken to about this, they may just give it to you and you pay them back gradually. Okay, so that, for a lot of people, you could get away with that possibly. So you can get the equipment that way. Generally, if you have a full-time center, you're going to be able to get the bowls and a lot of these things free, and the tables relatively inexpensively. So, okay, next page. And of course, you can always play outside the White House with Han Chow. This is an exhibition outside. That's Han, and that is the White House. And about 10 minutes after this picture took place, a huge protest march came by. We literally had to grab the table. We're off the side because it was this huge protest. Another
Are
funny
we
story.
testing your forehand?
Yes. Ask me later, because there's a hilarious story, which I'll tell some other time, about the big march that came through here. Okay, next page. All right, now we're into what I consider the most important part here. Up until now, I've been trying to, I'm trying to sell you on the idea and the importance of it. Now, getting a facility is important, but recruiting students in a lot of ways is the most important one. I've seen so many clubs where coaches go in there and they just don't have, they're good coaches, but they don't have students. I've seen so many junior programs. People think, I'm going to set up this program, I'm going to work so hard and build it up until it's a success. And as I'm going to get into, they've already failed without knowing it. And I will explain why. Okay? Curriculum mass for a junior program is 15 to 20. I'll explain how that works. Okay? I mentioned a minute ago that I've heard, for many times, I'll hear a coach say, I want to have a great junior program. I'm going to build this thing up until it's a big success. Now, when I hear him say that, this is probably maybe the most important thing I'm going to say tonight. When I hear a coach say, I'm going to build this program up until it's a big success, he's probably failed already. I almost want to say he has failed. The reason he has failed is because he's thinking, I'm going to build the thing up gradually. I'm going to get 5 students the first day, train them, maybe get to 7, then 9. What really happens, you get 5 or 6 the first day. Next time you bring in 2, but you lose 2. Next one, you bring in 3 new ones, but you lose 3.
Yep.
It's an impossible situation. You really do it gradually. The key is you need that large peer group on the first day. I find you need minimum of 15, but really 20. It's a kiss of death if you can't get a large number at the start. Okay, now obviously there's always going to be exceptions. Okay, but the most important thing is you've got to get a number right at the start. Juniors want to be around other juniors their age and level. You bring in 8, you're going to have an incredible struggle. You bring in 20, it sells the program. Just to give you an example, Maryland Table Tennis Center, we historically, since 1991, we've had 100 juniors, training in our programs almost on a continual basis for 18 years now, since 1991. So the question is, how do we promote this program? Do we advertise? What do we do to bring them all in? The answer is, we've done nothing to advertise the program since roughly 1993. Because once you reach critical mass, it's self-perpetuating. Now 20 is not quite self-perpetuating, that means it's a success. But when you have 50 in your program, word of mouth is going to continue. And you no longer really need to do anything. I think you need about 50 to make it self-perpetuating. But 20, you're pretty comfortable. Okay? So you need all those numbers. And what you want to do is promote your junior program in every way possible, simultaneously, with a target date for everyone to show up. Because you need that critical mass on day 1. Once you have critical mass, it promotes it by word of mouth, and that's when you will have success in this thing. Okay? So it's really important. The single most important thing to remember is you need to work every way you can to get all those people on day 1. Now, of course, you're immediately thinking, it's easy to say, but how do you get them all on day 1? How do you recruit the junior players? Now, along with developing your coaching skills, that's important. Recruiting junior players may be the most important work you do as a coach. Now, I've had some interesting discussion with European coaches and Chinese coaches. When I first say this, at first they're saying, huh? Because from their perspective, why is that important? If they want to be a coach, they go to the club and they coach the players. To them, they don't have the numbers are already there. If you go to a tennis coach now and ask them, how do you get your students? They say, I go to my club and the club brings them in and they pay us and we, et cetera, because they're already there. But if you ask them, what about the coaches from the 50s? Back in those days, they actually had to teach the coaches how to recruit students. Okay, that's where we are now. So it's very, very important that we're learning to do that. So how do you actually do it? Okay, ways to recruit junior players. This is the most important thing tonight. Do all these things at the same time. Let's go through these one by one, okay? Because this is the most important thing. Over and over, I've seen programs that didn't work. So many coaches, they say they really, really tried, they couldn't get the junior, they couldn't get the players. And I say, well, what did you do? And the guy immediately will say, I did this, this, and this. And I'm saying, okay, you did this, this, and this. How about this, 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 and this? I say, well, I just did this, this, and this. So they got 8, 10 kids, but if they've done everything, they've gotten 20 or 30, and it has been a success. Okay. Email press releases to the calendar section of every local newspaper. What that means is get every local newspaper, both paper ones, also online ones. They're easy to find. Do web searches. You can look in your telephone directory. That's how you originally did back in the 90s. Back then we had to fax everything. Now you can email them. Find every calendar section. For years, every week in the Washington Post Friday calendar section would be Maryland table tennis. And then something about the junior program or beginning classes. After our first couple of years, we never advertised the junior program. We advertised our beginning class constantly because I was always trying to bring in more people from the beginning class, I thought. But we never had to do juniors again after that because we reached capacity for our club. So, we always were looking for new players, but not that. But at the start, you've got to get as many press releases in the calendar section of every paper you can. You might also do paid ads. We did paid ads in Chinese newspapers. If you actually, some of you know Han Shao and Amrish Sahu, they both came because of the paid ads. We did a paid ad in a Chinese paper for a beginning class, and that brought Han Shao in. We did another one, it was one of the calendar sections that brought Amrish Sahu, who was a 25 player just on the junior team. Yep.
How expensive are those ads in Chinese?
Very, very inexpensive. I think we spent $100 and maybe twice, so we're talking $200 total, and they go to the whole Chinese community. Okay, and there's a Chinese community everywhere. I'll get to that part also. Number 2, copies of your junior training flyer, and you will have a junior training flyer to all local club members to give out to interested parties. Family members of current club members are a treasure trove of potential students. If you have a club with 50 members, average, every one of them, they're probably going to have 100 kids cumulatively, and you're going to get a bunch of them. One of the single best thing, way to get table tennis players is by gaining the table tennis players from the parents. How many people here have parents who play table tennis? Okay, so that's one of the best things you can recruit from. I'm always amazed that they don't actually recruit that actively. Okay, do milling goal, the current and past. This right here is a key thing. I should underline that. US ATT members. You can get address labels for USA Table Tennis. Right now, USA Table Tennis has 62,000 people since 1994 who have been members of the association. I might be off by 1,000 or so. You can actually get by age, zip code, anything. If you want to do a junior program, contact USA Table Tennis. Say, we're going to do a junior program. I want labels for everybody within, these zip codes. You can look up zip codes in your area, do everything within maybe 10 miles or so. You might even go 15. Say everyone under age 18. Make sure you say past and present and past members. This is also especially true when you're starting a new club. You want to do mailings to the past members. I found that we got more members when we send these things out to past members, because they're the ones, if they find a club opening nearby them, they come in droves. I found people I hadn't seen in 15 years who were members who just showed up at my club because of mailings we did. So that's a big thing both for a junior program and anything else, and it's very inexpensive. Obviously, there is postage, so you may want to limit sometimes within 10 miles or so for the junior programs, that type of thing. But you do want to do that. Put flyers on every bulletin board you can find, rec centers, YMCA's, Boys Clubs, colleges. Literally, go to the yellow pages, do web searches, find them all, drive around. You can find these things. Create a flyer with the tear-off phone numbers at the bottom. The one key thing is this. If they have a public bulletin board, put it there. If they don't, you need to ask. I did make a mistake one time of putting them up at a shopping center on a wall, and I got a call from the police the next day. So be careful. Look for the public bulletin boards and put them up there if you want to do a thing. You have a question?
In addition to putting the tear-off phone number, putting the tear-off website
Yep.
is extremely helpful,
that'd be good.
Yeah, that's good.
because you might not actually have a phone that you want called, but if you have the information on the website,
It's true. You need to have this on your flyers, your webpage. Always be advertising your webpage, email, phone. Everyone's different. Some people like to talk on the phone. I've taken to this stage where I do everything by email. Maybe it's just me, because someone emails me and I'm all excited, I type back. Someone calls me, my first thought is, okay. So it's a little different. But the idea is make sure they have contact information. Everyone's different on that type of thing. But you do want to get these flyers up, put them all over the place. Flyers at Asian restaurants and Asian churches. Look in the phone book. I had someone told me, I think it was in Colorado Springs, said, but there aren't that many ones. For example, Colorado Springs, there's no Chinese people there. Well, Colorado Springs, what's the I had these numbers. I think it's several 100,000. Yes, they have Chinese schools, they have Chinese churches. Even if there's 1% of the population is Asian or Chinese, let's say 1%, and it's Colorado Springs at 100,000, that means there's 1,000. If there's 1,000 there, there's going to be a lot of kids, and guess what? They go to Chinese schools, which usually means weekends, one day a week, they have a special deal with schools. If you go there, every one of them has 100 kids, every one of these things are hundreds even, and if you have 100 Chinese kids, you're going to be able to get a whole bunch of them. You do an exhibition there, you will get droves of them. It's a big thing. And I've yet to find a city in the country, and I've had coaches bring it up. I immediately go online and I find the Chinese school for that city. Obviously, if it's a town of 10,000, they might not have one you can find on the webpage, but usually there will be a Chinese community. There will be also a Korean community. You can find them, and they'll love if you'll come in and do an exhibition, and they'll love junior thing, because guess what? Their parents, to them, table tennis is like basketball. They love the idea of their kids getting in a table tennis program. You have a question?
Well, you just hit it. It's not just Chinese, Korean.
Yeah.
Look at the Indian center.
Indian, yeah, that one surprised me. That caught me off guard.
Any large ethnic community that comes from a background that table tennis is popular in your community.
Yep.
It could be a number of different ones.
Yep. Actually, we're a little out of order. So I was talking about the Chinese schools and so on. They train and so on, and do an exhibition, teach a class, give out flyers. They're informal. You will get a lot. Going back to this, Asian restaurants and churches. If you go to them and say, we have a table tennis club, we'll put your menu, a stack of them at our club, if you will put up a stack of flyers there. And they love the idea. They like table tennis. So most if you want to run a successful program, get your flyers in every Chinese club restaurant in the area. I actually haven't done churches, but I should. But all the restaurants, you put your flyers there, and you put their things there. If you go to the Maryland Table Tennis Center, you will see, I think, a stack of 2 types of restaurants. We used to have more. We went to 2 because two of them are now actually sponsoring us in various ways. We actually get a deal on lunches during our camps. They give us really cheap Chinese lunches. So when we run a junior camp, the session's over, it's lunchtime. Before we started the session, everyone wrote their orders down, and they deliver it to us really cheap. So it's a good deal. So, local schools. Contact local schools, offer to do exhibitions, or teach a PE class, and there you give out the flyers. Now, some schools won't give out the flyers, ask in advance. What my experience is the great majority will allow it if you ask. If you show up without asking, they'll say, no, you can't do it sometimes. But I've actually never in my life, and I've been to about, well, I don't know if it's 100, a lot of schools. I don't think I've ever had one that said I couldn't at least put a stack of flyers there if I asked in advance. Now sometimes they'll say, we'll give it out for you, like that, or they'll say put a stack there, but almost always they'll allow you to give out the flyers. But if you do the exhibition, you can talk about your program, and you'll almost always get a few of them. Key thing is, you have to do a lot of exhibitions. You'll pick up one or maybe one kid or two per exhibition, but they're going to kind of show up. If they see 6 kids, they leave. If they see a whole bunch, they stay forever. Okay, so you can do a lot of things there. Danny Seemler has been very successful in going to local schools with these flyers where he always is offering a whole series of lessons. I found myself, I did that once. I got tired physically because kids would come in and they all got these free lessons. I said, okay, never again, because I was giving too many lessons away for free and I was exhausted. So, but Danny does that very successfully. The key thing when you go to schools especially though is give them something for free, something introductory. Get them to come in. The key is get them to come in and say, first time is free, or even if you really want to have a lot of kids, tell them, come on in, we'll teach a 6-week sessions, once per week for free. Get them in the thing. Because the key thing is you've got to get them in there, okay? Craigslist.com, meetup.com, a lot of these things there. We actually started doing that, various times. Those things that they actually have things. I don't remember the actual section. You actually go to your region, and under that, you go to your region, and then you go to recreation, and you can advertise junior programs, beginning classes, private coaching. This is Craigslist. Meetup.com. We actually started doing a meetup.com at our club for a while, so you can actually set that up as well, though I'm not sure if that'd be a junior thing. So Craigslist, so I know, does bring in some people, okay? Or you could just put flyers in a bottle and toss them out to sea. Had to stick that in there. The key thing is you've got to do all of things. You don't have to do this one, but reminder, do all these at the same time, because the key is to get all the kids in there, 20 or more the first day. Now, there's other problems that can cause problems. For example, I know one club got a lot of kids the first day, and they say, okay, taste free, and now if you're interested, you can sign up for our 3-month or 6-month program. You can, if you want, just do 3 months, and they actually enforced the idea they had to pay 3 months in advance. Big mistake. When it was all done, I think they had 22 the first day, 3 the second day. My experience, I've never seen anything like that, but it was obvious because none of them were going to sign up for 3 months in advance. Our club's been going on since 1991, and we have never required anything like that. I emphasize this because almost every coach immediately, one of the things they want is they want the juniors to commit. And you can give that option, but I'm strongly urging you do it session by session with the option of doing longer. I think 90% of the kids in our program, it's almost a regular thing. They walk in and hand a $10 bill in, and they continue. They go in. Sometimes they do it at the end, but it's a very standard thing. Now, I'm guessing there are other clubs that might do it differently. But my experience is you've got to let them do it by session. I'm stressing that because I've seen that really hurt programs when they push them too hard. These are new kids, so you want them in there. Okay, so it's very important that you do that type of thing. Questions about these? Yep.
Do you think it's better to have like a session from like January to March where everybody signs up for that quarter, or just they can choose on their own 10 sessions, start whenever they want to start, and then 25 sessions start whenever they want to start, and then down to 25 sessions?
Yeah, I've had a lot of people who brought that up. That's something that we've never done. I think doesn't Sweden do something like that? Or are they pretty much year-round, mostly? Or are they just off in the summer?
They're off in the summer.
Okay, yeah.
But there's
So-
summer camps for the kids.
Yeah, so I think generally table tennis, where it's been successful, is a year-round thing. Like tennis, you might think is a seasonal sport, but the ones who are on the tennis team, most of them actually play in the off-season as well. It continues. I see them at my tennis center all the time. So it's generally done that way. Someone might find it that way, because a league system, for example, might work. If you have a league year-round, they eventually get tired of it. If the juniors train and they're knowing that there's a 3-month league system, that might work. We haven't actually tried it that way. So, but I do know a lot of coaches who thought of it, and I think it's better. My personal feeling is it's better to do it pretty much year-round. Maybe, I don't know about summer. Summers you do camps and so on, but I think you want to have it year-round because the kids keep doing it. It becomes that, basically they do school and table tennis becomes their hobby. Well, yeah.
Like, I'm not sure if you totally understood what I meant. What I meant was also like there would be January to March, then
Right.
right after the March one ended, there would be a March to June.
So,
And then September through December. You
okay,
know, so,
they
like,
say,
is it better to?
it's still a continuous thing, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
it's still continuous,
I-
but they would have to sign up every time
Yeah.
after like 3 months.
My
Like, I know
experience,
some clubs do that, and I want to figure out which one would be better. Like, is it better to do it like that, or just the kid can sign up for 10 sessions, 25 sessions, or 50
Right.
sessions?
my experience, has been when you do it for beginning class, for new people, but adults, you want to do like a 10-week or 8-week thing, then you want a very specific thing when they're new. For juniors, another program, advanced training or things like that, year round. You might set up something where you can pay for 3 months and get a discount. I think you want to do it as a continuous thing, because it is a continuous thing. It's arbitrary to say, okay, you're signed up for 3 months, although they may pay for 3 months to get the discount in that regard. But so again, for some reason, our kids don't do that. They all come in, hand their $10 bill in, and then they go out on the table. So I think it's better, except for a beginning class for adults, for most table tennis programs, just to have an ongoing thing, instead as opposed to saying 3-month session and another 3-month session and so on. Yep, Richard?
I think a lot of people do it differently.
Yeah.
In the past, for the introductory class when they first come in, normally, like I usually do like 10 to 12 weeks, and for a set fee. But they pay each time they come. They don't have to pay it up front, but they sort of sign up for that section. Then after that, if they go into something more serious, more advanced type of training, then normally we had some sort of monthly fee, which included so many group sessions and maybe a private lesson, or it was a package type of thing, just whatever worked, best. It's hard. You don't want to. The thing is, when they first come in, they're really scared to commit financially
Yes.
too much, and
Yes,
you really
yes.
don't want to scare them away.
Yes.
But you want to hook them. If
Yeah.
you get them in a 12-week program and get them excited, and then the parents see the value of it and whatever, then you can talk to them about.
The kids.
It's easier to talk to them about, okay, your son really needs, to be in a couple training groups and maybe one private lesson a week or something if they want to get serious. And here's the fees involved. And sometimes we used to have a package. If they bought X number of hours, they got so many free. There was a discount if they paid up front. And a lot of people pay up front
Yeah.
to get the benefit.
Okay, but so
It varies a lot.
okay. The key thing I want to stress, though, I must keep saying this, you want to do all these at the same time because you want to fill the place up. Now, one of the other mistakes, besides trying to make them pay, for 3 months in advance or something, you do a session by session. The other thing, at the start, because the goal is to fill the place up, keep the rates down. You want low rates. I've seen so many programs think we're going to set such a great program. We have great coaches, great facilities, nice tables. Well, of course it's going to be worth a lot of money. It's like, from their perspective, it's worth a lot. To someone who's walking in the door and for the first time, and they can do baseball, basketball, football, all these things very cheaply. You got to keep the rates down, especially at the start. So try to fill the place up. The thing is, if you have the rates low and you fill the place up, I challenge you to fill the place up and not have a very profitable program financially. Plus the fact, of course, it's a better program. Would you rather have a program that's a big successful, or be struggling with these 6 or 7? Every week you lose one and you gain one, you lose one, and eventually it dies down. And you're fighting, doing all these things week after week. When if you do all these things and get that critical mass, eventually you don't have to do almost any of these things. I mean, I'm not saying you never do any of these things, but until you have 50, you've got to keep doing all these things. Yep.
I also would say, and I think coaches, and I'm sure you've had this situation, most coaches won't turn somebody away because they can't pay. They'll usually find something for them to do in the club to help. I mean, I don't remember ever turning somebody away because they actually couldn't pay.
Turn the page. I think the next page we actually talk about something
okay.
involving that. Okay, got it.
Shut up.
First few sessions with beginning juniors. Okay. Before I go on, were there any questions about recruiting juniors? Any more questions on that before? Because that to me is one of the most important things. Okay. You've now filled the room up. You're ready to coach. You've got all these tables, and you have all these beginning juniors, and you're all set to run a training session, just like you saw the national team train when they're out there. They go out there, and none of them can actually rally. They're all total beginners without hand-eye coordination. What do you do? Okay? The beginning juniors really can't rally properly among themselves. They're surrounded by a crowd of them, and none of them can forehands, backhands. They're beginners. Yet you want them to have good strokes. What do you do? Now, there's various ways of doing it. I loved what I saw at the ICC program this last summer. I went there with Stone Bingston, and Rajul he recruited a whole series of coaches and players. Now we do the same thing, but I always went with the idea that you have 20 kids, we try to bring in 4 or 5, and so you have working 4 and 5 to 1. And I went out there and it's like, okay, they brought in 50 new players and they had 25 coaches. What they did is, in other words, it took what we did, they upped the ante quite a bit. It was 2 kids to a coach. Now, about half of the coaches were coaches, half of them were local players or juniors. You recruited lots of local players and juniors to help out for the first few weeks. The goal is you can make a deal with the top players and juniors, get for the trade-free sessions for their help. If you have a junior who can't afford things, we have a kid at our club whose parents are very, very poor. He is, for many years, he hasn't had to pay full price. He's been a practice partner like this. This kid has paid very little. He's been a practice, he's been an incredible thing, and he's in the quarterfinals out here right now. And I'm not talking on shot, another kid. You'll all be able to figure out who he is. But he's been a practice partner for many, many years. I don't think he pays much, but he's a great practice partner for the kids, and tomorrow you get to see him up against them in the quarterfinals. So make those deals with them. Have the locals feed multi-bowl to the beginning players. Normally I'm in Maryland, we bring these kids in, and we'll do 4 or 5 on a table rotating around. Sometimes we'll rotate on the robot, things like that. And ICC, there'll be 2 to a coach. A coach to 2 players. Sean, you had that, remember that? You had the same thing when you were there, I'm guessing. And so sometimes there'd be 3, but the idea is the coach can feed multi-ball and really work with the player one-on-one. Now if you do this, it works really well. It really works. There is another way. You could require the juniors to take a few private coaching sessions. Originally, that's what we did. We used to have a rule at Maryland Table Tennis there in the early 90s, I'm not sure when we ended it, that all juniors had to take, I think we used to have a requirement of 5 one-hour sessions with a coach before they could come to a group session. We wanted them to be able to go in there and actually be able to hit forehands, hit backhands. We'd still hit them with others at their same level, but we wanted them to have a certain level. Of course, it's not as important now as if you have practice partner. You can put them with one of the other juniors or something. So you could require that. I'm not saying you don't do that. That's actually a good idea because it's not always easy. But if you can get a bunch of locals to feed multi-ball and work with them for a few weeks, a couple times a week, they'll be much stronger. They'll be very excited. These kids get really excited about it. So we may start copying some of those things. Okay. So questions on any of this before we move on? Okay. Get them open. You have them for years to come. I just love this picture. How you get that in there? So these are some beginning juniors you can recruit. There's a little thing I wanted to point out though. Notice how low this table is for these kids. One of the things that some clubs are starting. We haven't done Maryland table tennis. Our club Jula has done this and other ones. They've bought tables that are very, very low. Okay. One of the real things about table tennis is you really can't play effectively until I'd say about 6, maybe 5. Okay. I mean the table's up here. I don't think I've ever seen a 4-year-old who could really do it effectively. A few 5-year-olds, around 6, 7, you can start rallying effectively. Then I went to my tennis center. What do you think would be, how old do you have to be to play tennis? Guesses? And them, obviously it's going to be lower to your guess, but before you came to this room, most people you'd probably say you got to be at least 5 or 6, something like that, 4, but they have programs I've watched for 2-year-olds. I dropped my tennis racket when I saw this. I watched it because one day I came in, I didn't know about this. I was getting ready for my group session, and there's all these 2-year-olds out there. It's really mixed in 2 and 3-year-olds, and they can do it. Now it's not regular, they're not hanging tennis and stuff. They're doing things like bouncing in on their rackets. The coach tosses it to them, and they just have to hit the ball. But they do all these fun games, and they start when they're 2 or 3. So table tennis can do the same thing. They have adjustable tables that you can order from overseas, and you can do this. Now Barney Reed Jr., who came here as one of the top 8 seeds, he's been on the national team. When he was 2.5 years old, I went up to his house to practice with his dad for a week, and I hit with Barney Jr. We had 100 forehands in a row. We had 100 backhands in a row. He was 2.5 years old, but the table, Barney Sr. had cut the legs off. The table was 12 inches off the ground. So I hit these forehands on my knees, 100 in a row, and Barney Jr. was 2.5 years old. So That's, if you're really serious, if you want really up the ante, we don't do these things here, but these are the type of things that if you want the top junior programs, these are things that we haven't done yet. ICC does not do that yet. We don't do that yet. So this is your opportunity to top us, because you're going to bring a bunch of 2 and 3-year-olds, and we wait till they're 6 or 7, and your 6 and 7-year-olds are going to stop ours at that point. So that's just something to think about. Next page. All right. Typical training session. We're now going to actually talk about how these sessions work and so on. A lot of times, a coach is used to doing private coaching. He's not used to having a whole room full of juniors. So what do you do with them? Obviously, they're beginners. We covered that. Now, what I found is on school nights, 4:30 to 6:30 is a really good schedule. If you do it earlier than that, not all the kids can get there in time. If you do it later than that, it interferes with the club hours, their dinner, and things like that. Plus, some of the kids, they have to hang around there waiting for it, and they not enough time to do much of anything else. So 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock, didn't really work. Other areas might be different, but 4:30 starting point seems to be perfect, and that seems to be catching on other places too, I've noticed. But that's what we do. I think I've seen others that do 5 to 7. I think they do just the round off there. But they do have to get there on time. Weekends you can do it anytime, but because 4:30 works on weekdays, I like saying 4:30 to 6:30. On these days like that. So we do weekend things. Weekends usually are the bigger thing, but I like to do 4:30 to 6:30 on weekends as well. And then we do some during the week as well. So, the drills. Professional Coaches Handbook, which every one of you has in your packet, and which will be online soon. It actually has a whole series of drills in there. I put together a new drill section, which wasn't there before. And there's a bunch of drills I've done for years. I've actually put in there a bunch of Stone Dingston's drills, so that's in the drills library. But when you start the session, start easy jogging and stretching. One of the big changes used to be you just stretch and go out there. And most of the top trainers will tell you, start with the easy jogging to get the muscles loose first. Not fast, but it's a really good idea to start with them jogging. You do all these things like that, various things. But the main thing is jog for a couple of minutes, let the kids warm the muscles up, then go through the stretching routine. I've actually heard some trainers say the jogging is good, but juniors don't need stretching. That kind of threw me off. I've never heard that before. Generally, you warm up and then you do all the stretching and so on. And then you go to the drills. Again, all those drills are in there. I want to encourage you, though, build up your own drills library. I know that most top coaches reach a stage where they can, off the top of their heads, call drill, 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 drill. I remember when I was with Stellan, we were discussing drills. I started challenging. I said, okay, I want to practice this immediately. Give me 3 drills that would cover that in various ways and detail. So it was very impressive, this type of thing. So build up your own drills library, and then when you do a training session, you have a general idea what you're going to do in the session. Call out the drills, but then you can very quickly individualize them for individual players. A pip-up pen holder, or a chopper, or a 2-wing looper, they're not going to do exactly the same drills, although they'll sometimes do a lot of the same ones. Okay, so you do want to do that. I also encourage you to finish with games. A lot of programs, they do so much drill, 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 and they can't play games. You do need to have a lot of match type practice also. Now, a lot of them you can play leagues and things like that. Our club used to be about 2/3 drills, 1/3 games. In recent years, it's gone to 50-50. They literally, a 2-hour session is an hour of drills, and then they play 11-point games where they move up and down the table. I never really liked it. I think it's somewhat because the kids like it as almost laziness. I always thought 2/3 drills, and then the last 1/3 of the session, you play games is good, but you might do the last hour could be drills. Games and so on. Best one usually is you move up and down the tables, 11-point games. If you win, you move up. If you lose, you move down. And the kids like that, and they get a lot of match practice that way. So, I think I had some more than, at least in the next page for a second. Okay, well, that's just stretching out. Start with one. Chuck?
One thing that we did this summer when I was at ICC, especially for the 55 kids that were under the age of 10,
Yep.
every time we did our drills, I had kids call out the number of shots they did consecutively. So goal was, okay, let's do 50. Okay, how did table 1 do? How did table 2 do? How did table? So at least it got them thinking not so much of winning, but improving a particular stroke. And one kid might have done 100 pushes, and he was pumped for the whole day. So you can do that in addition to the games.
That's true, because one of the key things is, one of the questions is when do you want them to start competing? I was talking about how you might want to do 1/3 games, and the kids really like that. But some of these 7, 8-year-olds who are first learning, you might not want them because they're doing this. Now, as soon as they go to a game, they're going to immediately do this. Stellan said he doesn't want them to play any games whatsoever for the first 6 months. I think he said 6 months of training. No games, just make sure they have good technique. And, you can play games with the drills.
Right.
Sean said, you have a game, see how many you get in a row. Then target practice. Put targets and things like that. I do, anyone who's ever been to our camps, or any junior, just go up to him and say, hey, you know what, Larry, and the drink bottle? And the kid will probably break up laughing, and believe me, they'll have some stories about, because I really hammered up these games about hanging the bottle. So ask me about that later. But yeah, we do a lot of little games like that.
But along the counting, just to take it to the next level, make them do it as a team. So it's a team number. Because you don't want one kid saying, well, I did 20 and he's missing. Well, how many did you do as a team together? So when one person misses, the team, that's their number. So it really slows them down to say, okay, well, I've had kids at ICC, they did, I think, pushing drill like 250, but they did it working with each other, and that's the teamwork aspect that I think the group session really is.
They all got to help each other.
Yeah, because you don't want to have the slammer on table one and the picker upper on table two.
Yeah, the game type thing really comes. I think they have to reach a certain level. After 6 months, then they're ready to start playing more games. They might do some, but you want them to have good basic technique before they really start playing any type of real games or anything, or any games at all, because otherwise they're going to just mess it up. Doing this, practicing this, and then switching to this in a game is going to just mess them up. So Stellan is very, very big on that. In fact, Stellan was very big on the idea of spending literally weeks or a whole week on just the forehand, and maybe a whole week or days and days on just one stroke, get perfect. At first I thought the kids would never have the patience, but then when they're counting, I found they got all excited about it. It was actually, they had more patience than I thought they would. In a section coming up later, I'm going to be talking about that.
Yeah, I guess, Larry, I think you just answered your question. I mean, how, especially for like beginner 6, 7, 8-year-old, and they can hardly even hit the ball, and then you're spending weeks with just having them do that. Don't they? How did you keep their interest? Did they get bored?
Okay, it doesn't take weeks though, but the idea is they always, what they do is first, the kids want to please the coach. That's one of the things that's actually a thing. If you say, let's see, can you do 10 in a row? And they're going to be so determined to get that 10 in a row, then 50. Now me, I always like to say, you got 50? You realize that if you can do 60, you're a professional. They're going to do 60. They're going to keep working at it, or I'll say 100, something like that. You keep on encouraging them. When they're that age, you can really find all sorts of ways to encourage them. They have a lot of fun doing this type of thing. So, yep.
Going back to what you said earlier about 50% practice drills and then 50% games, like all the junior programs I've ever been in, it's like usually maybe in a 2-hour session, like just the last 15 minutes or last 20 minutes, maybe winner's table. Like, is that, do Chang and Jack do half winner's table, half drills?
Historically, we've usually done 2/3 drills, 1/3 games. I was kind of skeptical. They've gradually changed to 50-50. They do the drills the first half, take a break. I still remember I was really surprised when they would say, okay, we're going to do games now. I thought it was like once, when they run the sessions, it's always that way. When I run sessions, I generally do about 2/3. I think 2/3 drills. There is a lot of, there are a lot of coaches that want to really focus on drills all the way through, and only games last 15 minutes. There's a good part, there's a bad part. The downside is I've seen juniors become so drill-oriented that they can drill and drill, over and over and like that, and then they get into games they can't play. On the other hand, if they're doing an hour and 45 minutes of drills and then 15 minutes games, but then they're playing in leagues or club matches, things like that, say 2-3 times a week, that's fine. But you want to make sure that they're getting enough games and match practice in as well, so they can incorporate the stuff they're doing. Plus, it keeps their interest up. If they're just doing drills, never playing games, they have nothing to train for. That's why it's also, I'll be talking about that a little later when you get to it, about giving them goals and things. Yep.
One thing that you can use as sort of a bridge between full games and drills is a structured game focused on a drill. For instance, say you're working on drop shots or short serve return. You can play games where every serve has to be short, and then, or maybe the return of serve has to be a drop, and then you can play free after that. So you are playing a competitive game and enjoying it and learning from it, but you're also focused on one aspect that you're really drilling at the same time. So it's not a totally free thing, and it's a good bridge between playing a totally free game, and you still have that experience after the structure work, So both.
I was looking because I know all the kids here. There's Ambrish right there with his arms up like this. What question?
Yeah, I was wondering why can't like Steve or Butterfly, make a table that you can separate the leg and have a lower table.
It does.
Well, they have adjustable
Jula
tables.
has one you can
Right.
roll down.
That's
up and
what I
down.
was talking earlier,
Double
those
handed.
ones.
Oh,
that-
it's Donic?
Donic
One of them has
double-handed.
one you can roll up
Yeah,
and down.
remember I was talking about these little ones, they're not tables that are low, they're adjustable, they start legal, they can be lowered down.
Oh,
Okay,
okay.
and that's the thing, like, does anyone know of any clubs that are actually, in the US, that are actively using these here? So to me, that's one of the big things, when some program says, we're gonna start at 3, we're gonna dominate the under.
But I
5
know they
division."
sell them.
Yeah, I've seen one, I've held them, and so, yes, that is something I think that some will take to the next level. I'm told they're doing it all over Europe and China now, so that's something, that could be anything.
China started for 30 years ago.
30 years
They-
ago.
When I was in
Okay.
China in 70s,
Yeah.
they had those tables
Yeah.
already.
So that is the next, a new frontier.
Yeah, I thought
Next
that
one.
they actually
Yep.
had holes in their gym where they lowered the table into those holes.
Maybe.
Instead of making
It's
this-
just a bad
Okay,
idea.
well, quick question, do we need to take a break or can we go straight through, because we got another 35 minutes? Okay.
Let's go straight through.
Okay. Here's some principles on juniors. Now, this by itself could be a long seminar, it'd be a week-long program. I want to talk about some of the really major ones, some of the big ones, mostly the things that are different from coaching juniors, especially in a group session, but in general, as opposed to coaching adults. Okay, and a few things, they generally have less hand-eye coordination and slower reflexes, so you have to understand that. I've seen coaches get angry at kids because he's not, doing what he wants them to, because the kid just can't react to it, and so on. So you have to remember that. On the other hand, their learning capacity, they're incredible mimics. When I first started coaching, I remember one of the worst things that dawned on me is that some of my coaches were copying in fact, I tend to play a little stiff, a lot stiff. And I actually incorporate into my coaching, I always tell them, the beginners, I'll say, watch Jen over there, like that, and I'll actually tell them, that one of my technique's pretty good, I tend to be very stiff. So I warn them, you don't want to be stiff like me. But believe me, I can give you some names of some kids who got pretty good, but I was coaching them and I realized, like, wait a minute, they're playing like stiff like me. So you got remember, they are natural mimics. They will copy what they see. Okay? So that's the big advantage. If you coach an adult, better hand-eye coordination, better reactions. It can take them. It's very, very difficult for them to undo habits. They can't copy as well. So that's one of the biggest differences. You can have a kid, very rapidly can have very good technique, very rapidly. That's why Stellan, for example, was really pushing the idea of focusing on one stroke for a lot of time because it'll be perfect the rest of their life. You take an adult and do the same thing. After a year, he may do it, but he's still going to have hitches or problems with it. The juniors are going to be perfect forever once they learn it early on. So that's a thing to really think about. They do have a short attention span, but not always. When they're absorbed in something like hanging forehands, when they start counting, they're more focused than adults. Adults, you say, let's say 100 forehands, they'll get a little bored. They'll want to know why are we doing this, or they'll, like that. And you tell the kid, you got to go for 100 forehands in a row. Just go off the side and watch them, and watch that focus. You'd be amazed how focused some of them can be. So that they do it. It is a wide variety. If they're focused, that means you're doing a good job. If they're sort of like this, then you need to figure out why they're not really focused on it. Then you might want to consider do something different. Believe me, they will tell you. Do you need that proper balance of training versus gaining fun activities? Now, we were talking about that 2-to-1 thing. There is another problem that's come up. I know several programs that was able to bring in lots of kids, and their idea is table tennis should just be fun. And I basically agree with it, except here's the problem. If all they want to do is have fun, then it's like Parcheesi. There's no reason for them to stay. They'll come in, play games. And so I know some programs, the kids come in and all they do is have fun in games, but they have no vested interest to continue. You got to make sure you're focusing on teaching them things as well, not just going out there and playing all games or just doing all fun things. If the goal is that all they're going to do is be laughing all the way through it, it's not going to be a success. I can name a lot of ones like that. The thing is, you don't need to be laughing all the time to really enjoy table tennis. If they're learning, they're absorbing what they're doing, that's what you want to see. Okay, so you have to find that right balance. You don't want to go to the other extreme where they start to hate it. Believe me, I know kids at my club who learn to hate it because they reach a certain level where they start to feel like, I have to become better. I've got to live up to the coach's expectations. And so they don't want to play games. Even when we have games, they say, it's okay if I go practice serves, and you're impressed. But then you start realizing, wait a minute, this kid's so obsessed, he's going to be burnt out, and he's going to hate, he's not going to like it. He's doing it because he feels like he has to do it. So you got to stress that balance of fun versus work. Okay. Another one is use simple language to communicate. I learned that the hard way. That up until about age 10, you can say something very clearly, very concisely, and everything's said, and they have no idea what you're talking about sometimes. So, partly because they're not always listening, but up until about age 10 or so, you know, use simple language, make sure they're looking at you, make sure they're paying attention, and you probably have to say it 3 times before they always will really get to them. But once you get to them, they will say, oh, you can understand when they understand it. But you do have to keep it simple a lot of times. Keep it fun. Like I like to throw in little funny stories to get their attention and so on. But yeah, just keep it simple. Discipline. I was debating whether to bring that up here. It's not really a big problem in table tennis. Occasionally you have a program, like, you know, whether it's a junior program or a coaching seminar where there's a discipline problem. For the junior program, make it clear from the start what's expected of the players. Okay, the kids kind of want to know what they're doing. If you're going to be playing games the last 30 minutes or last 15 minutes, they kind of want to know that. You know, and I think it's very important. Let them know. You know, practice hard, and then we will play games after the break at this time or something like that. Okay, so make it clear what's expected of them. Tell them during the drills you're supposed to work hard. Just try your best. If you miss, no problem. But just try your best, and then when you get to the games, you can relax and have fun. Okay, so let them know what's expected all the time. If you act professionally, discipline is rarely a problem. Okay, and you know, at the worst, some of the younger players might need a timeout. I'm sure if you ever worked with juniors, you've had the kid who is manic and goes absolutely, "Ugh," and even if he isn't mean to, that's when you just say, okay, well, let's just sit down until you're ready to play again, and just sit them down. But don't try to get too angry. Anger doesn't really work much. Just sort of sit them down until they're calm and everything. And believe me, they want to get back in there anyway. So if I was debating whether to bring it up or not. Oh, next page. Quick question. How many people know who that is? Okay. Hey, it's unfair. You know who he is, yeah. I'll get to that. Treat table tennis as a sport, not a game. It's a game, obviously, but if it's just a game, it's all fun games. If it's a sport, it's both fun and something that you can do, that you strive to become better and better, and then they really want to stay year after year. One of the things I'm really proud about Maryland Table Tennis Center is that we have a kid who comes in for a couple months when he's 10. He's still there when he's 18 years old. You know, most of our kids are long-term. That's one thing we're very good at. That's why we stop advertising. It fills up, and we can't do anything. We actually had a stage in the late 90s where we suddenly couldn't produce juniors at a certain level because we had no more hours left, and we had this big group moving up all the same age and none coming behind because there were no more openings. So we had the stage where we had all these kids at the same age and nothing behind them. So we found, you know, that's something, it's a good thing to have happen, actually, though. Don't want to get caught in the idea of making everyone a world-class player. Find the balance. I think that's obvious to everyone here. There are exceptions. There are one of those who will point out that the best athletes have parents or coaches that stand over them and make them do everything. And unfortunately, there are some results that way, but usually you're going to burn them out. And let's just say that you're not going to be too popular. I've seen some nasty cases. So find that right balance. Ratings. I hope some of you saw my article in the coaches newsletter that just came out. Ratings are probably one of the worst things that ever happened to junior table tennis in some ways. Let's just say we have a lot of juniors from our club, even our club, who avoid, from our club and other ones who avoid rating events and so on because they don't want to lose things. That's a really tough thing. I hope you all read my article about that because if you don't stress not worrying about ratings from the beginning, they're going to be stressed on the rest of their life, their playing career at least. You've got to make sure right from the beginning, ratings are a fun thing when you go up, but don't worry about them because otherwise a kid goes out there and loses, and all he's thinking about is, I'm going to lose rating points, and they're scared of torments and they can't improve. So you've got to make sure they put ratings in the proper perspective. Okay, if you're Stone Bankston, Danny Seemler, they call it a cancer. They want no juniors. They want to abolish the rating system, but definitely not juniors. Stone has already said that it's the worst thing for table tennis and for juniors having a rating, the rating system, because it puts pressure on them. It's not needed. If you are in our rating system, you go out there, blow a match, you're going to pay for it for a long time. They're looking at a thing, they want to please their coach, they want to please their parents, and suddenly they've lost 100 rating points. Tennis, gymnastics, you have a bad performance, that means you didn't win that day. There's always tomorrow. Tomorrow, everything's back to normal again. So it takes all the pressure off. So you got to stress the importance of that. Goals, that's a very important thing. I think Sean, that's one of the things that Sean has been very big on. In fact, I think that's my son. So we can tell him tomorrow.
It's gonna be on the web.
I was just looking for I was just looking for a picture of someone that could have these things here. U.S. champion, world champion, galactic champion. Let me know when we're back on.
You're on.
We're back on? Okay.
What you just said.
sorry, Peter. Short-term goals, a lot of times it's going to be something like, I want to be able to loop 50 balls in a row, or I want to do really well at a tournament. I sometimes hesitate to say one tournament sometimes because that's all or nothing. So a lot of times you want to give them goals that if they work, they know they will do it. Okay, so a short-term goal might be something where they're working on a specific stroke or something. Okay, intermediate, that's where it gets a little different, where you may want to be at their best. Ratings sometimes can be a goal. I usually don't like using them, but yeah. If a guy, some of them say, I want to be 2,000 level, and the stress is 2,000 level. That's one of those things up in the air, whether you want to actually use a rating as a thing. I'm skeptical, but it's been used a lot, and I know I've used it sometimes. Let's say, I'll tell them, okay, we're going to break 2,000 by the end of the year. And one of the key things is, not that you're going to be over 2,000, that you will break 2,000. That's a difference. That means there's no pressure once you break 2,000 of going back under, because you've already made the goal. There's a big difference. Okay, so the goals, you might have 5 chances, 5 tournaments, so there's a lot less pressure that way. Holding the rating and not blowing it is where the pressure comes from. Okay, so you want those ones. And of course, there's the long-term goals. I think sometimes, Junior Olympics or Junior Nationals, a kid might want to be a national champion. He might want to win the under 1800 event. He might want to be advanced to the A division or the C division in his league or something like that. So make sure they have some sort of goals like that. Along with that, some people stress notebooks. I haven't really done that a whole lot, but a lot of them, like the juniors, they keep a diary. I know that's very important as they reach the more elite level. I haven't done that at the lower levels. We do it in camps, but not regular. So that's another thing you might want to think about doing. Okay? One last thing, team uniforms. You want to get the kids excited? If you've never seen kids more excited than when they get their uniforms. They all show up at the Junior Olympics. They're all wearing identical shirts. They get real excited.
That's a good point.
They're strutting with their shirts and everything, just like I am with my certified USDTA's coach shirt. Yes. So that's a very big thing, is to get the team uniforms for the kids. Okay. Questions on this so far? Is that the next one? Okay. Now, a few tips on the coaching of them. We talked a little bit about the differences. Now I'm again to some specific things about coaching. Let me check my time. Okay. Again, this is one of those things. This could be a book. We're going to cover some of the main things you will face. When you coach juniors, your first session, you're going to learn a lot very rapidly if you haven't done. So you'll learn a lot. But I'll walk over some of the main things. Younger kids, I always stress start with ball bouncing. Like the kids doing there. Kids in the 5 to 8 age group, start with that. Just bouncing the ball up and down. You know something? The kids love doing this, bouncing the ball up and down. And once they learn to do this, it's like, okay, I can do 100. I say, okay, now try the backhand. It's like, what? So then they try to do this one. And then there's this where you alternate, which by the way is actually easier for most kids than doing this one. A lot of them have a lot of trouble with this one. But yeah, they really can develop the hand-eye coordination. So for the younger kids, I really stress that. A lot of times until the kids go off the side, I want you to bounce that ball until you can do 50 in a row or 100 in a row. And they'll really work at getting that number. And they really can improve on that. I'm going to talk about some specific things like the grip. One of the biggest problems with juniors, I've seen juniors, they start out and they'll be in a coaching program, and over, because their hands are smaller, they tend to grip it differently. A lot of coaches don't know until it's too late. If you start with a bad grip, you're going to develop some really bad habits. Now, the most common problem is they will put their finger right down the middle, and they get this really awkward thing, this loosey-goosey type thing. So that's one of the common ones. You don't want that finger right down the middle, where they're doing, it's going to mess up their strokes a little bit. You also don't want them holding it too tightly. Did I mention? Let's see. You can either have the floppy grip or the too tight grip. Yeah. So you want to make sure they have it a regular shake hand grip, finger down this. Now it's generally because the hand is smaller, the finger might be a little bit higher than we might do it. But you don't want that finger down the middle. You don't want this tight thing like that. I said with the finger down the middle, sometimes you get this loosey thing. Other times it's this really tight thing like this. So you want to really make sure they get a good grip. I've always found that if you get a good grip and good foot positioning, everything in between generally will fall into place. Okay, but the grip thing is a very important thing, especially where they put the index finger. Okay, so the index finger, a relaxed grip. You know the old thing: if someone walks up behind you and grabs the racket, it should come out of your hand, but it shouldn't at the same time. Shouldn't shake. It's got to be somewhere in between. I think Stellan said it's like holding a raw egg. You should be holding that raw egg nice and firmly, but it's not going to break. Question?
Yeah, Larry, I agree with what you're saying, but you show them the grip, and then they'll, within a
they
couple
go back,
minutes,
yes.
they're right back.
Yes.
So what I'm asking is, do you really correct them every time that you notice
Yes,
they
you
have it
do.
wrong
Yeah.
until they?
Yes. You make
Okay,
it very
so
clear.
something to
You
do-
gotta make it very clear to them that this is what you must do. Now, what tends to happen though, the reason why the kids keep going back to that, usually it means they've played a bunch of times with the wrong grip. That's why it's so important that they have the right grip the first time. If they have that proper grip from the beginning, it's much easier. Now, if they don't, they can still learn a proper grip. I know I spent my first year playing with this grip, and I was able to switch, but you do want to stress it from the beginning, and getting that grip right is really, really important, because even, you'll see at the world-class level, you're going to see a lot of players use slate backhand grips, slate forehand grips. I use a slate forehand grip, and there's nothing wrong with that at the higher levels, but when you are developing your strokes, you want a neutral grip. I hadn't really gotten to that, but you want that grip where it's right down the middle, lined up at the wrist, because if you use a forehand grip where it's angled one way, or a backhand grip angled this way, forehand grip angled this way, it suddenly throws the arm off, and they're going to develop the strokes awkwardly. So you want them start neutral. And then when they reach a certain level, I usually say 1800, 2000 range, roughly. Others may have other ones. In that range, they might start considering different grips, and then, based on their style and so on. But you want to make sure they have really sound strokes before they start doing that. Yep.
Just also, it's good to mention if they're very small children with small hands, 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds, a lot of times they need smaller rackets. And they do sell youth rackets, or you can modify rackets. Because it's almost impossible for a 6-year-old to hold an adult racket properly. Their hands aren't strong enough.
That's when they hold it real tight, finger down the middle.
And
it's
you
the only
can
way.
you can get they have smaller headed, smaller handled rackets that are just about perfect for 6-year-olds, or you can take one and modify it, but it's very difficult for them to hold on to a standard racket.
Yeah, and then just have a nice, one of the smaller rackets. Yeah, you don't want super slow. You don't want the fast. Believe me, the kids want the fast rackets. Yeah, medium racket, medium speed sponge. If the kid is training regularly and he's hanging with the coach regularly, I've actually found it's okay they use moderate sponge. I don't, you don't want to go the full 2-2, but I find that they can almost use the same sponge that the advanced players are using, just thinner, and make sure the racket is no more than medium fast. That's where it slows it down. But as long as they're playing regularly. Now, if they're playing, just going out there playing games and stuff, and they're using these fast stuff, they're going to be history. They're going to develop a lot of bad habits. Okay. Next page.
I want
Oh,
to
yeah.
say something. Another
Sure.
habit that it's common to the kids is to change the grip, forehand to backhand grip
Yeah,
during the drills, and this is gonna.
that's what Larry
That's
just said.
detrimental in
The
the
neutral
future.
grip is pretty important at the beginning.
Yeah, but even that, you do drill for forehand, they get a grip for forehand. When you start backhand, they change the grip,
Mhm.
Yeah. You can.
and they have to. At one point, they have to keep the same grip.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
common until
yeah.
they find the right.
A lot of times you can look at a player, a club player, I mean, adult one, but your average club player or tournament player, you can look at them and say, he's probably he was developing with a backhand grip or developed with a forehand grip. The guy, you see him like this, he probably started with the backhand grip. If you see guys, these big floppy forehands, he probably developed his game using the forehand grip. So it really falls that way. Next page. Serves. Juniors have a lot of difficulty generating spin at first, but they take incredible delight when they develop their serves. So teach them advanced serves as early as you can. One of the things that's always funny is I sometimes feel guilty because I almost lied to the kids. The kids would go out there and use perfect technique, go into the thing, they can't really snap their wrist as fast or graze as much, but everything's good, they're just not getting as much. And they're getting some spin, but not as much as you want. But it's the first step. And they'll say, did I get good spin? And I'll say, yeah, that's good spin. And inside I'm thinking, okay, but if you just keep doing this, you'll start getting good spin. But the key is if they're using proper technique and they're really going into it, even if it's not that much spin yet, if they're doing it that way, they'll gradually be able to graze it finer and finer. And believe me, the kids, I've seen so many kids who have developed such incredible serves because they'll practice and practice and practice. I've had some kids at our club who are 13, 14-year players, but boy, they have serves. I have to really focus. There's other ones, of course, who just drill and drill, never practice serves. There are two extremes. If you get them into serving early on, they will really work at it. If you don't get them into serving early on and just drill, 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 they never take serving that seriously, I found. So you get them into it early so they actually think of it as an important thing. John?
One of the most common mistakes our kids make, and you see it with adults too, especially when you're working on serves, is they don't hit through the ball. They're so afraid of
They
missing.
do this.
So if you
Yeah.
can actually,
Mhm.
with the kids that we had at ICC when I was working on serve, I just have them take the ball without the table and practice going underneath it to see if they can make the ball come back. So you
Right.
get them to have a feel of
Yeah.
stroking through it. And that's the same on their forehands and backhands. You want to make sure that they're stroking through the ball because a lot of them are just so scared of missing that they make contact, and that's the end of their stroke.
Yeah.
So especially with these serves, and we don't want to get into technique, but it seems like for kids, you want to get them thinking, I've got a backswing, I got a contact, and I've got a follow through, so that they're thinking a full stroke.
Yeah. A lot of times, because they have less hand-eye coordination, they do have trouble grazing it. Well, the adult picks up sooner, but one way to do it is have them actually do it then on their rug, like you said, and they can actually see the thing spinning backwards, that type of thing. So when you see a coach, they see a coach doing that, they want to do that immediately. So believe me, anytime you do something that they think's impressive, they're going to spend a lot of time. So if you take the early one and serve backspin and have a roll right back to you, they're going to want to do that. As soon as you hit break, they're going to start practicing that.
Or when they serve, you can let them run to the other side and watch the ball as it's spinning
Yep.
on the floor. I mean, the kids are like, mine's still spinning, mine's still spinning.
Yeah.
And you just want to get them to understand that grazing concept, like Larry says.
Yeah. Timing. Kids have trouble with it, but I actually came upon this on myself years ago. I was hanging with the kid and he was struggling, and I started going da-da, 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 and it was unbelievable the change. Whether it's multi-ball or hang live. I do it even more when I'm hanging live, when they finally graduated from multi-ball to live playing, but I'll do it with multi-ball too. But you just start going da-da, 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 and the kid suddenly can time it perfectly. I do it with adults sometimes as well. In fact, I say, I'm going to do this until you can hit 50 in a row, and the adult wants to get through it. But the juniors, they find it so much easier. They can time it. A does hits the table, and a as they're supposed to hit it. And I have seen dramatic improvement on that. To me, that's one of those big eye-opening things, how much to help them with their timing. So you do that, and they've done that for a few minutes, and then they pick it up. So I find that as a really important thing on the first day when you're coaching a beginner, that little da-da, to show them the timing. So that's a real important thing. Drives, forehand and backhand. Again, as we talked about earlier, start with the multi-ball. One of the common things is the racket tip goes up too much. Instead of doing a stroke like this, you're going to see the kids doing this type of thing with the tip up. You've got to get that racket tip down. Because they're shorter, it's more natural to do it like this. But you got to keep it no more than 45 degrees. As soon as they do this, that's a bad habit. And the kids, believe me, a lot of them want to do this instead of this. So you got to stress that they have to rotate back. And once they rotate back, then it's a little more natural. But a lot of them are going to want to do this instead of this. Key thing there, get that racket down, because if the racket's here, if it's up here, they want to do this. If the racket's here, they can't do it unless they stroke it properly, or at least semi-properly. So that's one of the very important things about laying that tip well. Not too jammed at the table. I actually learned that one more. Stellan was really stressing that. I actually was never stressed it too much. I actually thought if they stay close to the table, it actually forced them to go sideways and hit the ball. But actually, I'm starting to see better results on what I was watching out there. When they a little further back, so they can take a nice, full, relaxed swing. When they're up to the table, they're a little more rushed. They're doing this type of thing. Stellan was urging them to, at least an arm's length back, so they can take a nice, relaxed swing, stressing that they're going to turn sideways, back, forward. So you don't want them too jammed up at the table. It's something I've done too, but I never stressed it until I saw Stellan. So you want them off there, off the table, and turning the shoulders. You don't want this. It's got to be this. That rotation every time. Okay? So that's some of the technique things. Focus on technique first. Once they have good technique, then you can go to consistency. They'll come together actually pretty fast. On the first day, they're going to start getting, a lot of them are going to start getting pretty good technique, and you can say, let's do 10 in a row. Okay? And the key is you want to make sure they're doing it properly. If they hit a bunch of proper ones like this, and you say, let's do 10 in a row, and he immediately does this. You say, no, that doesn't count. You got to make sure they're hitting properly. Okay? Looping. Here's one this could be a real major subject of discussion. Historically, most players were taught forehands first. After they reach a certain level, then they go to looping. It can be taken to extreme. I know a coach from this one center was at our Junior Olympics, and we had kids. Sonny Lee was about 9 years old and looping every ball. And the coach said, "God, it's amazing how you can coach when he can loop when he's only 9 years old." I say, "Well, why can't yours? Are you teaching them?" He said, "No, they're not good enough to loop yet." I said, "Well, how good are they?" "Well, they've played for a couple of years now, but they're not ready to loop yet." And I've said, "You've been playing 2 years and they still haven't looped yet? What's their rank?" He said, "Oh, they're 15 something." And they're 1,500, but all they can do is hit and block, and she didn't think they were ready to loop yet. So that's one extreme. The basic idea is historically they teach the forehand drive, and then when you can do that consistently, then you learn how to loop. That's Chinese theory. When I say Chinese theory or European theory, I'm saying this rather loosely because obviously it's not a universal thing. But in general, the Chinese or Asian theory is you learn to drive, and then looping is an extension of the drive. It's drive, you learn when you can do this really, really well. A lot of the Chinese coaches will have you do nothing but this for months and months. And then a loop is just an extension of it. It's drive, loop. They say it's almost the same thing, just an extension. So that'd be a lot of Chinese theory. The European theory, a lot of times, and again, this is just a loose term, I say European theory, a lot of European coaches, they want the kid to step off the table, let the ball drop down to them, and just spin the ball from the beginning. Now, I've never actually seen that coach at the beginning, but I've heard about a lot of coaches who stress the idea of teaching the kids looping from the beginning instead of driving. Now, it's one of those things, I don't have a firm theory on this. I generally go with the idea you got to hit 100 forehands in a row, and then we'll start doing looping. If you can do 100 forehands, good technique, I think you're ready for looping. But I've heard so much about these differences in theories that I think that's a major topic that people should discuss more.
One interesting
Yep.
idea about that is when you have a small child who's, the table is up here, it's actually almost easier for a 6-year-old to back up a little bit, let the ball drop and spin it, than it is to hit it up here sometimes. So yeah, I think if you're starting them around age 8 or 9, you could go either way.
Yep.
Would be fine, but sometimes it's actually easier to teach a 6-year-old to top spin first.
Yep. I have
just
seen
because of this relationship to the table. Now, if we could roll the table down, it wouldn't be a problem. You could do either one.
There was a kid who was about 6 years old who came to our club, and he, right from the beginning, he seemed like he had a natural loop. And but I know that he was working with the other coaches, and they immediately, I am hitting forehands, and I remember I spent a lot of time. I was thinking, it's like, I wonder if we should have done that way. Maybe this kid was staying here. It's like a natural loop on day one, but they sort of switched him to hitting it first, and then came back, back to looping later. I think we made a mistake with that because he seemed like he wanted to let the ball drop down to him and spin, and he seemed to have some pretty good control on it. So that might have been a mistake with that particular kid. So that's one of those things to think about, because if you're going to be out there in the field coaching a junior, and the first junior comes up, he looks at you, you've got to decide what you're going to do. Are you going to focus on making sure you get 100 forehands first and then go to looping or something? Now, Stellan would say he wants to make sure you have a really good forehand and then a really good backhand. But he would go to looping, I think, after a few weeks. I think he goes to looping. But that's assuming you're playing several times a week. He wants to make sure you have a very strong foundation before he gets into that. Other coaches will do it differently because Chinese, like I said, a lot of the Chinese coaches and a lot of top Chinese players did nothing but counter drive and hit for months and months. And you can look at the top Chinese players, top European players, just watch their strokes. Any good coach can look at them and tell how they started. Yep.
One thing that also works very well with juniors at the beginning is shadow practice, making sure that they can demonstrate the different components of whether it's a forehand or a loop, and you say, okay, everyone now focus on your shoulder turn, focus on your backswing. And when you have ICC, I had every single, the 55 kids all together in sync. Okay, we're going to do 50 forehands, let's go. 1, 2, and again, that speeds up the process, especially if they're new to the sport, where they don't have that negative feedback of missing the ball, because they're going to miss the ball. I mean, the first time they play it. So, I mean, having them actually do the stroke, and where you can say, Johnny, why are you going over your head? You need to follow through right close to your face, or something like that.
When they're starting out, if they're having trouble with the stroke, put the ball aside and say, let's use shadow practice, do that thing properly with me. A lot of times you do with them. One of the things I've found that actually works is if the kid's right-handed, I actually do the stroke left-handed so they can be like a mirror image. I find that very valuable. I hope this looks like a good form, because if it isn't, I've destroyed a lot of juniors of copying this.
It's a little stiff, Larry.
How much forms, Matt?
We covered the stiff part. Don't copy me. I want you to do exactly what I say, but don't copy that. Pushing. It's a technique you have to learn. I mean, it's very important. But I've seen a lot of juniors get ruined because they learn to push early. And let's face it, the junior wants to win, and he discovers that at the lower levels, what wins? Pushing. So you don't want to make that too much of a habit, because once it becomes incorporated, it's very difficult to break that. So you do want to make sure they do it. Now, some, of course, naturally attack, and you can say, well, it's okay to push too, but just make sure it doesn't become a habit. You're going to see a lot who do that, especially some with passive personalities. They just want to push, 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 and keep the ball going. So, next week. Okay, we can back up. We're pretty much done on everything. Let's go back again. I just want to go over some of the resources to improve the skills. Now, this is all in the Professional Table Tennis Coaches Handbook, which you all have. Question?
Yeah, Larry, before going through this,
Let's go back one
limited time.
Yep.
So we talked about clubs and how to set up those and where to get those resources. Can you also talk about your experiences, what to avoid? Because recently I heard there was a big club made in Michigan with all the flooring and everything, and then suddenly they had to close.
Okay, you're talking about what to avoid if you're opening a full-time center?
But yeah.
Okay,
Or even playing in schools, I mean,
Yeah.
the insurance or.
yeah.
I mean,
Well, insurance you can get through USA Table Tennis for $40 a year or whatever the club affiliation fee is. Get insurance, that's a key thing, which if you're doing under game facility, I was thinking of putting that in there. One of the things that USATT needs at some point is a manual on how to set up a full-time table tennis center, because they are starting to pop up over the place, but every person who does it has to reinvent the wheel. Now, as far as opening a full-time center, there are a lot of things that you have to watch out for. I didn't really bring a list of them. I mean, you have to make sure a lot of facilities are going to want a long-term lease, and you got to be real careful, because if you get stuck in there, you're stuck there. So you want to make sure you have the right place. It's kind of a long list. We can probably, let's talk about that after the 10:30, because I can stay up late, I have no problem. I can tell you a lot of the stuff about the junior program, of course, which you want to avoid when you're saying that. But like I said, we talked about recruiting and keeping them, and I'm going to stress again, the most important thing is do all those things at the same time, get the 20th at the same time, keep the rates down, and make absolutely certain that you don't require them for long periods of time. Get them all in there, turn them into their own peer group. They make them their own peer group, and if you do that successfully, 30 years later, those same kids are going to be coming together in reunions because they grew up together half the time. Yeah, that is true. A lot of these kids, they're together for many years afterwards because they all grew up together. So, let's go to the next one, and then we'll be pretty much done and ready to go to more questions afterwards. Ways to improve your coaching skills. If you want to be a coach, you do want to be a good coach. You don't want to just simply show up and be a bad coach. All these things are in the professional table tennis coaches handbook, but there's all these various links here, coaching resources, things about coaching certification. There's a How to Be a Champion, which is a list of 10 articles that are really, really good. Do we have the links? Go to the next page. I think it's a bunch of books. Yeah, books. The two manuals here are very, very valuable, I found, so you might want to get those. There's a bunch of other ones here, of course, and there's a lot of good videos and things like that as well. Okay, so it is something important. But if you want to improve your coaching, one of the best things you can do, find a coach who's running a junior program who you know is good, and call him up or email him and say, hi, I'd like to help out your camp. And he says, well, we're not having openings right now, so I will do it for free. You're in. So yes, coaches can always use you if you're willing to volunteer. Think of it as your college education. If you're willing to go in there and be a feed multi-ball, be a practice partner, and the whole time you're observing them, just like I did with Stellan there, and I've done with Chen Yinghua, Jack Wong, Danny Seemiller. I went to about 5 Danny Seemiller camps and a lot of other ones. If you're willing to go there and observe for free, and be a free coach, you will get education because you will see what they do, and you can actually take what they do, and then you can copy it and become your top coach. In fact, you can copy what they do and then improve upon it. Okay? Questions? You're quite in general and everything, because we pretty much covered most of the material.
How do you deal with overbearing parents?
Oh boy. I know the coaching committee has been discussing the idea of putting together a parent's guide, and I think that's very valuable. I have one outlined on my computer though.
That's something that is high on the list here in the next couple months. That's the best suggestion anybody's given to me in a long time. We need an actual manual on how to be a good table tennis parent.
If someone were to say, what are the 2 biggest problems that we have at our club for our juniors, I would say ratings and overbearing parents. There are parents who really get into it. One of the big mistakes I think a lot of programs might have made, I'm not sure about this, I've seen that a lot of programs, the parents, like in the tennis sessions, in my tennis club, I've seen in gymnastic sessions and things like that, parents are allowed to watch from the sides, but they're not allowed in there. At our club, the parents not only are in there, but they do all the ball pickup for the kids so they can keep things going. And it seems to work, and our coaches seem to like it, it works, but it does put a lot of pressure on the kid. If the parents are really overbearing, it depends. On one extreme, you can do what Danny Seemiller did. I know he had a parent that kept getting more and more overbearing. He gave him one warning. Next time he did, the parent and the junior were kicked out for life. Now, I thought that was a little extreme, but when I talked to others, I found out the guy really was killing the program. He really had disrupted everything. And basically, Danny said, your junior can come, but if you can't come in anymore. And when he came in, they were kicked out. So there's the other extreme. But again, it's difficult. You could call them aside and try to talk to them and explain that we need to tone it down a little bit, but it's not an easy thing to do work with. That's true in all sports. The best thing you can do is try to encourage them, just to be encouraging, but they've got to be on the sidelines. And if they want to talk, and there are going to be ones who want to do it, the key thing is tell them not during a session. We will talk in private after the session. That's the key thing. If you have an overbearing parent who insists on disrupting a practice or a tournament or anything else by getting really, really loud and abusive or whatever, then you've got to tell them either we do this after the session or you have to leave. That's generally the policy we go by. I don't think we've ever actually kicked anyone out, but we've had parents that we literally said, if you do that again, you just simply can't come in here anymore. But usually the key is we'll talk. Let's talk in private. Yep.
You know, there's no one answer.
Yep.
You know that. It's a lot of education. But one thing that I've done in the past that's worked to some degree, I don't know anything's perfect, is I actually have I don't want to say it's a contract, but I have a
We'll contract with the parents.
parents and the athletes, and it basically says, you know what, when you're part of this program, these are the things that the coaches are going to do for you. We're going to provide you this training, we're going to go to tournaments with you, we're going to, be there for, we list what we're going to do. And here's what we expect from you as an athlete, and here's what we expect from the parents. And we all sign it. And it doesn't mean anything. It's not any legal document, but psychologically it states up front, what your philosophy is for your program.
I've seen a lot of that where they have remember, I think I did one section where I mentioned making sure the kids all know what is expected of them, and that
Right.
if you do that right from the beginning, I think that would be important to them. Related to that, because obviously if the parents are disruptive, the kids are going to do things like that. I've had a policy with almost all our juniors for many years. I mean, it's not an official thing, but whenever they reach 2,000, I could probably do it sooner, but every junior in our club, when they reach 2,000, I've always bought them this book, The Inner Game of Tennis, the classic guide to mental side of peak performance by Timothy Galloway. It uses tennis as an example. It is a well-known among athletes. It's considered the classic. If you want to study sports psychology or learn about it, I would strongly urge that. I got the Amrish Sahu, Han Shao, I go down the list. Almost every one of them, when they break 2,000, it's always like my present. Now, maybe it's a bad idea because I'm connecting with a rating. I don't actually say this is because you're over 2,000. But usually they might only be 13 years old. Now, Amrish, for example, that became his Bible. So it's just something, little things like that help. And it does help with the sports psychology. Okay. Officially, we're pretty much at the end of our time, but let's take some more questions.
Yeah, Larry,
Going all night.
how much do you get into the rules with the kids?
Okay, I don't make a big deal out of that. I know the umpires always stress that. What I stress always is when you get to serves, I always stress that's the one time I really make a big deal out of it. Obviously, you explain the rules to the younger kids and everything. In fact, you make a game of it, quizzing them. I quiz the kids on rules. When you get to serves, that's the only thing. At the beginning level, you do all sorts of antics. You explain the rules. You might do a serve from 20 feet from the side or things like that. Challenge them to say legal or illegal. And by demonstrating it rather than just telling them, they actually will learn all the rules. Now, the key thing is you want to make sure that they actually don't have the experience where they don't learn a legal serve. They go into a tournament and they have a miserable experience. They never want to play again because they start getting faulted because they're doing the same serve they've been doing. So make absolutely certain they have legal serves that they can use in tournaments. If they can't do that, they have a serious problem. I've had some kids who was struggling to serve legally one time. I said, just do a simple serve you can fall back on, and then we'll keep working on your serve, because he had an illegal serve they've been using for years, and suddenly everyone was faulting him for it. So, but yeah, it's important to learn early on. And at all levels, it's important they serve it legal, because they will get burned, and there's no reason to serve it illegal, usually. There is one thing. There are a lot of service rules that have a purpose, because if you break the rule, you have an advantage. Anyone who plays gradually learns where you want to push the rules. For example, the ball has to be visible, but that doesn't mean the arm pulled out. They're going to say, well, if I can hide it for a couple extra seconds or something like that, or if I can get the body in the way, or maybe a little less than 6 inches. Little things like that are advantages. So the key is make sure they understand what the rules are, and if they go to the limit, just make sure they understand that they may get faulted. And if they get faulted, like if they're going to backhand serve, they're going for a 6 inch, then a 5 inch, and they keep challenging that rule, that's fine, as long as they understand, if they get faulted, they have to right away, don't get mad at the umpire, because they, they probably did serve illegally. Just make sure that, oh, okay, and then make sure they can get back to perfectly legal. There's nothing wrong with challenging a 6-inch roll, going for 6 every time. But if you get faulted, you sure as heck be able to raise that thing a ½ inch to make sure it's legal each time. Or at least an inch or something like that. So you shouldn't let it bother you if it happens. Questions? Yep.
I don't see in the resources here your phone number or your email or Richard McAfee.
I think mine's on the front, my email's on the front cover.
You will find
Yeah.
all of our email contact for the coaching committee at USATT. If you click on committee, you'll see all of our names and our phone numbers and
Go to the very, there's, go back one page. We actually have, the web page and all these things. These are all in this part. They have a lot of coaching resources. Here's all about certification and so on. But basically, these things here, if it's USATP, just go here and you can find all of those things. My email, I think, is on the
It's on the
cover.
first page.
Yeah.
and I do want to stress that if you have any questions or anything we can help you with, don't hesitate to email me. I'll do all that I can do, and I have some great committee members. I have Sean O'Neill, and I have Brian Pace, and Wei Wong, and Nan Lee, and I have a lot of people who are not officially on the committee but are doing great things to help our committee, like Larry. And I think we need to give him a round of applause for one thing. That was a really good presentation. I've always felt that good coaches, one of the requirements to be a good coach is being an eternal student yourself. And obviously, you can tell Larry is an eternal student. He's still going to observe other coaches and get more and new information. You never know everything.
Yeah. Well,
And it's a testament to somebody that goes and studies another coach and other methods to learn, because that's really how you learn.
yeah. One of the reasons why you can learn so much at the Stellan camp. Let's suppose there are other coaches who probably coach as well. But one thing that Stellan does, which I had never really seen in ongoing program as opposed to short things. One of the things Stellan does is, instead of saying, okay, next drill we're going to now do the blah 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 drill. At the end of each drill, like you do your 7 minutes, he does his 7 minutes. Instead of calling out a drill, he said, everyone in, we all gather around. Our next drill, we're going to be doing this, and then what's important is we're going to do this. I want you to stress that. And I was asking about that, and it turns out they do that in Sweden as well. Even the elite players, when they change drill, I mean, not every single time, but they're constantly getting together to discuss what's important. So when they ran these camps, every time they changed the drill, we came together. He gave you like a 1 to 2 minute talk about what he wants you to focus on, what the purpose of the drill was, and when you do that, it really sticks in your mind. And then I started incorporating all of those things into my coaching as well. So, okay, I want to thank you all for this. I hope to see you all here. In a year or so, I want to hear back from some of you. Okay, about your programs and so on.
And thank you to Sean for videotaping that.
Thank you,
I,
Sean. Thank you.
If anyone wants my
Thank you,
contact
Richard and Drew and
information,
Yeah.
You've got to edit.
emails.
Yeah.
Huh?
You've got to edit.
I hope everyone saw the first coaching news